Okay, so what's next? So we know that quantity supply and quantity demand respond to price. That's what supply and demand are, is those relationships. But there's clearly something that we have left out so far, which is that some things respond very quickly to price changes and some things respond very slowly. Right? Some things there's a big difference when price changes, some things don't. And so this is going to matter, right? We can imagine if this whole logic of the supply and demand curve is based on the idea that we're going to respond when prices change, we're going to respond to these incentives of prices, then it probably matters that some things are going to elicit bigger responses than others. We're going to call this elasticity. Elasticity is our measurement of how quickly or slowly quantity demanded or supplied responds to a change in price. We know that it's going to respond, but how much is it going to respond? I keep saying quickly, I should say how much. How much is it going to respond? So let me give you an example. So let's say you've decided that you would like a nice 40-inch television for your dorm room. So you go to figure out what a 40-inch television costs, if you don't know, and I want you to imagine two different scenarios. Right? These are not two different competing stores. This is two different states of the world. So you want a TV, you go to check it, and it turns out that the true one price of a television, a 40-inch television, is $300. Again, forget what you think it should be worth in the store. Just compare this to your marginal valuation. How many of you would buy the television at $300? That's not like 4. All right. I need that number back. Let's change this. Let's say that it's $100. $100 for a TV. There we go. Okay, great. 1, 2, again, 20, 21. Okay, 21. All right, how about if it's $200? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so no surprise here. We doubled the price and we lost a lot of our quantity demand. That's exactly what the demand curve says should happen, right? Price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. We saw that right here. Great. Let's ask a different question, okay? Instead, it's the first holidays after the pandemic ends, and your family's going to go have a gathering for the holidays, okay? But it's going to be in Los Angeles. You're going to have to get on a plane to go there. You have to buy the ticket. So I can imagine you go on to find the cheapest airplane ticket to get yourself to the holidays. If you're not there, your parents are going to be angry at you. Your grandma's going to call you and yell at you. So I can imagine it's $100. $100 for this plane ticket. Who's going to get that plane ticket? $100. 1, 2, 3, 4, 21, 22, 22. All right, so the plane ticket, price, quantity. Okay. Now, turns out you were wrong. It's not $100. It's $200 for this plane ticket. Raise your hand if you buy the plane ticket for $200. 1, 2, 3, 14, 15, 16, 17. So we had the exact same price change in these two scenarios, right? In both cases, the price doubled, went from 100 to 200. And we actually started in a very similar original position, right? The quantity demanded was very similar in the price of 100. But as the price increased, we did get a drop in quantity demanded, which again is what the demand curve says is going to happen. But it's a much smaller difference over here than it is over here, right? Clearly, there's something different going on that we need to be able to represent in our supply and demand model to figure out, okay, well, we're building a model of markets. Something's going to be different about the market for televisions as opposed to the market for airplane tickets, right? So our measurement of this difference is going to be elasticity. We're going to call this a very elastic response, a very strong response. As the price goes up, the quantity drops really fast. It really drops a lot. Over here, we have a relatively inelastic response. So this one is more inelastic, and this one is more elastic. Right. We still get a response. We still see that the quantity demand drops when the price goes up, but it doesn't change by nearly as much. So in both cases, the price doubled, but the number of people buying probably changed by different proportions. So what this is telling us is that the demand for these two goods is responding very differently to price. And we're going to describe this sort of responsiveness as elasticity. So demand for a good is elastic, quantity demanded change responds a lot to change. If demand for a good is inelastic, quantity demanded does not respond so much. You can keep them straight by measuring a pair of elastic pants. You pull on the waistband of some elastic pants, they move, they change a lot. Inelastic pants do not change so much when you pull on. So we've got this idea that different goods might respond differently. Right? And I've given the example on the demand side here, but the same thing is going to be true on the supply side, right? There's going to be some goods that that respond very quickly in their supply and their quantity supplied to price changes, and some that respond very slowly. Okay. So we want to represent this idea that there's these differences between goods in our model of supply and demand. Thankfully, we've already represented it. We just didn't realize we were doing it. A good's elasticity is just baked into the demand curve itself and the supply curve. Once you've written down what the supply curve is, once you've written down what the demand curve is, or once you've graphed them out, you've already shown something about the elasticity. So to characterize a good, we can talk about the slope on the curves, right? The slope of the demand curve, the slope of the supply curve, how sharp, how shallow or steep it is. Okay, so let me draw out what I mean. Let's do demand first. Draw a demand curve like this, a demand curve like this. So any guesses before I tell you, which of these two is going to be more elastic, a stronger response to changes in price? Raise your hand if you think it's the one on the left. Raise your hand if you think that's the one on the right. All right, so let's see what we got here. It goes about equal there. So let's imagine the same price change in both of these, right? Just like we were doing over there with the plane tickets and the TVs. I'm going to pick price 1, and let's increase it to price 2. Follow along. We'll follow along here. We're going to ask ourselves what changes quantity demand. Q1, Q2. Q1, Q2. So over here, we get a bigger change than we do over here, telling us that this is the more elastic of the two curves, right? Because for the same price change, we saw a bigger quantity response. And you can sort of imagine, however much of a grasp your brain has in geometry, you can sort of imagine it that way too, right? The steeper it gets, the more changes in this direction you get for the same changes in this direction, right? You're seeing more price change relative to quantity change, which is a small quantity change, which is going to be inelastic. Same thing's going to go on the supply side. You can guess which one of these is going to be more elastic, right? It's going to be the shallow one. Go P1 to P2. Big change over there. Tiny change over here. It's not no change. Inelastic doesn't mean that it's completely unresponsive. It just means that it's less responsive, right? There's a sliding scale here of how responsive it is. Any questions about this?